I mean, I'm cooking from home all week, but Anna wanted pizza today for lunch, so that's what we're having. Real talk though, what is up folks? I do hope that you and yours are well in this beyond crazy time. I know that there are a lot that aren't. If you are cooped up and symptom free, thank you for being smart and listening to the forces hard at work on this project that are way smarter than us on this topic. If you're on the front lines of this thing, if you're hard at work delivering meals, or if your spot has completely switched to doing takeaway, thank you as well. It's folks like you that make sure we can all continue to enjoy this thing that is food that brings us together. I was reminded as I was watching a video by a creator that I follow named Tyler Stallman, I will link his video down below, that we should leave the health advice and info to the experts. Whether it's education or entertainment or whatever you watch these videos for, that's what I should be doing in a time like this, to be a digital friend for you, if you would consider us that. So the comments section and Twitter and the subreddit and this community, that should be the place where you can come and feel heard. So yeah, expect some Instagram live streams this week if you aren't following me there already. I've got a ton of this place called footage that I need to edit and bring you along to meals like that, even though it is so incredibly crushing to me that you can't go to these places right now. It's very, very strange. I finally got time on my hands to shoot reps number 2 with radish and shallot, and there's probably no better time than right now to hunker down in your kitchen and improve those skills. And I've been testing with this. This is a knife that Abe at Eating Tools and Roland Lanier have been awesome enough to send out. Plus, as per usual, there's some awesome extra bonus content for Patreon supporters. I did put out a message on that platform. If you are experiencing financial hardship, it is the last thing that I want you to be doing with your finances, is supporting me on that. So if you need to give it a rest for some months or some weeks, no stress. You watching and liking and commenting is way more than enough in a time like this. But back to that bonus Patreon content, what you're about to see is a clip from one of those sessions, and it's all about creativity. It's a live stream that I shot that kind of went a bit wonky again. This segment is specifically around organizing your ideas. Thank you as always for your attention. I hope you stay safe and well. Please enjoy. Going into organizing ideas, I think that I've used a ton of systems in the past. I wanted to touch on ones that I was using early on in my career and then focus on kind of what I'm using now that I am forced not just to keep track of my notes when I'm going through cookbooks on my day off, but now go through what I use to communicate my ideas to other people. I used to use notebooks. I used to have moleskin notebooks. I used to categorize them chronologically. So on my days off, I would have like 3 or 4 cookbooks spread out in front of me. I would open a ton of different tabs on different restaurants' menus, and I would see kind of what are people doing right now? What ideas do I see that I was like, okay, I want that in my repertoire so I can, when I'm writing menus later on, because I wasn't writing menus at the time, I can use this info to help me later. So the important reason that I wanted to talk about notebooks is because I had principles that I would use during my notebook phase that I still use today. So those principles being, when you're writing down an idea, it forces you to slow down and articulate that idea and solidify that idea in your brain. Because with the onslaught of ideas that we're able to see through scrolling through Instagram and Twitter and whatever you use, it's very easy to get informational overload. And when you take the time to write an idea down, and this is proven, it helps you remember that idea. So I like that. I still like notebooks in many regards, especially when you're early on and you haven't seen the combination of razor clam and coconut before. If you write down razor clam / coconut, and I used to do this with sets, so I would call them sets. So if I saw lobster, parsnip, vanilla, spinach, I would write that down as a set. Forcing yourself to articulate them with the notebook, I think, will help a lot of you. And it's something you're doing already, but I wanted to share why it's valuable to organize your ideas in that way. And you might not think that the notebook is the right way for you to do it, but understanding the principles of why this is important, I think, will help a lot of you. I think the other value in having a notebook and forcing yourself to page through it to get to the current page is you're doing what I'm calling building and cultivating a garden of inspiration. So you have to walk through this garden to get to wherever you are, and you almost arrive to your research session inspired because you're looking at all your past notes, and you give yourself the ability to just thumb through this source of things that you've found interesting. And that can be incredibly inspiring. Like, I have all my notebooks still, and I can look through, like, what was inspiring me 6 years ago? And things go in cycles, right? It's like fashion. So something that you wrote 9 years ago might inspire your next menu. And just because people haven't seen that idea in a while, all of a sudden it's creative, right? And I think the value in that lies in it being, like I said, a garden. You don't walk into it, and that's the reason I use a garden. You don't walk up to a garden and see a finished plate of gnocchi in the garden. You can see a potato, and so it's not, the value of a notebook is not just because it has finished dish ideas in it. It's because it has all the other stuff that goes into it. So you might see green curry sauce in your notebook, and you might be really frustrated on this beef dish you've been working on, but then because you see the words green curry sauce, it's almost like you plucked that thing from the garden and now you can use it to, does that make sense? So that I see as value in a notebook. And then I think the other value of having pen to paper is you can sketch things out. I use the analogy in my notes, our industry isn't code, right? Our industry isn't just numbers and letters. There's a visual element to it. And when I talk about things like flavor and execution being such a valuable asset to what we do, I think that being able to draw your ideas out and then ultimately see them in this presentation, and then what if I plated it in a bowl? How does that change the dish, you know? Now, another thing that I wanted to show, and I will do a little bit of a screen share. Maybe I can actually do that right now. If I do QuickTime, I can share my screen. Or we'll just do some screenshots, Joe. Does that sound good? Of like things that I've done in the past. So I use an app now called Notion, and that's how I keep track of my ideas and my inspiration, not just on the video side, but also on the food side. So if I hear someone in a TED Talk talk about a flavor combination, that goes into Notion. It's a great app on my phone, also on my desktop, where I can organize photos and text. And if I see an article, that's how I save stuff for the podcast. So if you guys haven't checked out Notion yet, there's a bunch of people that have better templates than I have to just organize your ideas from like a mood board perspective, or keeping track of things that you can go from idea to like, I tested this, to it's finally done. I know a lot of you are like working on your pop-up concepts right now. So highly recommend Notion. It is very visual, which I also think is stimulating for me because it works better with pictures than something like Google Drive does, if that makes sense. I think the other thing that I wanted to touch on is my menu templates that I used, and I've mentioned this in the past, where if you have a menu structure, and we'll throw one up right now, where I would use I'm going to read through a few of them right now. I would use the idea of a kaiseki-based menu, where each dish in that menu actually has a name, and it means like small fried item, or it will be seasonal pickles. And there's like a Japanese word for it, but it's like a Shakespearean play that has a structure to it. And so I will use that as a blank template to do what I'm calling going from 0 to 1 as fast as possible. Because you want to avoid the blank canvas syndrome that a lot of people struggle with. When you have free reign over doing whatever you want, it can become paralyzing, because you'll write something like lobster and maple, and then you'll say, that sounds kind of silly, maybe I want to use langoustine. But if you give yourself this framework, so I'm going to read you the structure. So for me, I've laid it out as snack, soup, fried, raw, fish, salad, meat, cheese, chocolate, coffee, takeaway. And so that structure gives me the ability to, if I say I want to use asparagus, I'm forced to think about where in this framework does asparagus go. And maybe I'm thinking about using it in a raw presentation. So I will put raw there, right? Or I'll put asparagus next to the word raw. And then as I'm plugging in other things, so I'll say duck, and I want duck to be the main meat. I want lobster to be in there, but, well, the fried element is already there, so I can't use lobster and raw. So what if I use lobster in the soup, right? And so then I'm forcing myself to shave down these pegs because I've already laid out the holes, right? So if I want lobster to go somewhere, I have to turn it into a triangle so it fits into the triangle hole. Does that make sense? And then, so my advice to you is to realize how you can get from 0 to 1 as fast as possible, because then you can start to edit, and editing is infinitely easier, in my opinion, than coming up with a new idea. And then the second piece to that is to create your own prompt based on your frequently done ideas. And so to maybe give you a little bit of context, maybe you aren't wanting to do kaiseki menus. How can you think of your dishes like a nigiri? So how a sushi chef thinks about a nigiri. So they would think that structurally a nigiri is seasoned rice, fish or shellfish, and then a brush of a sauce, or like a pickle, or like a paste of some kind. So how can you think of what that is? So maybe your idea is like base of a grain, protein, vegetable, right? So come up with that template for yourself. Maybe it's not a tasting menu. Maybe you just have ideas of like, that's the old school catering mentality, right? Where it's starch, veg, meat. And give yourself those prompts so that when you present yourself with an idea or an ingredient, you know how to interpret that based on the lens of, like I said, your frequently done ideas. And then my last tip on organizing your ideas is to use something like an iPad for drawings, especially if you're going to start to rely on more of these digital tools. It will give you the ability to, when you're sharing, like when I show a new dish idea to Hubert, it doesn't work all the time for me to articulate with my words how I want this dish to look. Sometimes if I just do a simple, and it's like, guys, it's a Microsoft Paint level of drawing. It's not a beautiful stone notebook kind of drawing. It's a very amateur-ish representation of like, I want it to look like this, and then I want this underneath, and then I want this to be able to garnish to give it some height. That's basically all my drawings are. And iPads, guys, are like $300 now, and you can get it with the pencil, and it's an amazing tool for your creativity. All right, expanding. So going from idea to execution, that's the next point that I kind of wanted to touch on. And that's the thing that differentiates us from other industries.